I've always believed that accuracy and coordination and stability are something that is really hard to bring into a fitness program. If anybody has ever done like even a moderate load snatch, I think you know almost immediately whether you're going to have a successful lift. And that's because of the accuracy and the coordination and stability that's required.
Yeah, let's dive right into the Freebell. And I know that I'll probably be layering in other parts of your story and the why and all that stuff, but that's what caught my eye. I was scrolling my Instagram, and I saw on your feed that you created this new product called the Freebell, and it's like nothing I've ever seen before. And I'd love to kind of hear what's your description of it, or like what's your elevator quick description of what the Freebell is.
I always, I describe it, it's being so new, I've really tried to like bring it down to like being very specific from the make of it, because I've of course been thinking about this almost nonstop for 4 years, right? So like I have a really good understanding of this, but it's an offset bilateral, meaning like two sides weight with a rotating handle, and this weight to me brings something to our single arm weight implement that we would see in the sport of weightlifting, right? Like I've always believed that accuracy and coordination and stability are something that is really hard to bring into a fitness program, right? And it's really hard, honestly, it's almost impossible without a coach. And I saw a need, especially during the lockdowns when my gym was shut down, and we sent people home with like a kettlebell and a dumbbell and things like that, and kind of what was happening during these workouts when there wasn't a coach present. And it wasn't, I think people get really, really stuck into having a coach, and they just kind of like listen and move. And I wanted something that gave like some feedback, and then kind of had a requirement of these lifts that I love so much, being like the snatch and clean and jerk, of that coordination, the stability, and the instant feedback. I mean, if anybody has ever done like even a moderate load snatch, I think you know almost immediately whether you're going to have a successful lift, right? And that's because of the accuracy and the coordination and the stability that's required, along with the technical bar path. And it's very similar to how the Freebell reacts in a lot of the big dynamic movements.
So to me, when I saw the demo video that you made and everything, it kind of looks to me, again, I've never put my hands on this thing, so I can't tell you what it
Yeah.
feels like or anything like that, but it kind of looks to me like you found a way to kind of marry a dumbbell to a kettlebell to a barbell, and what makes it unique is the types of, like with like even with like a dumbbell or a kettlebell, you know bar path, the way that the implement moves past your body, it looks like to me like you figured out some of the classic problems that we have with those other implements. So tell me a little bit what separates this product from other things.
Yeah. Well, one of the first, I would say like watching my clients' videos and stuff really, really sprung this. But honestly, and I've moved with kettlebells a lot, and I've moved with dumbbells a lot. And I was at our house working out with I was working out with the same implements that everybody else was during the lockout. And I was doing a kettlebell snatch workout, and for one, I hit my forearm, and I was frustrated. I was like, this is ridiculous. And then I started, to like feel like and this is, and I do want to be clear, this is no downfall on other implements. I think I love kettlebells. I use kettlebells all the time. But the leverage overhead, being that it was shifted back on your wrist, right? So it's putting weight on your wrist, kind of in a weird spot, which is putting on your elbow and on your shoulder. And in the fitness world, like we see that people will typically have shoulder issues because of anterior tightness, anterior overstrength, posterior weakness. And the kettlebell actually requires you to stay anterior, right? Because that weight is posterior on your upper body, like you have to essentially like activate pec minor and your front delts to stabilize that weight because the weight is shifted posterior on the arm. And I was just like, man, like I want something like, I like the fact of like the complexity of the kettlebell, but I want something that for one, I can be completely stacked, right? Because that's like such a thing that I've been preaching in weightlifting for so long, is like how to stack your upper body in a snatch and an overhead squat and in a jerk. But would also kind of have that complexity, because the kettlebell does have some complexity to get into like a snatch or clean position. Like there's a learning curve to it, right? Like, and I like things that are difficult that you have to practice a lot to get good at. So I wanted something that still like had that little bit of complexity, right? I think it does a couple things. I think for one, it keeps people interested, which is a challenge in fitness period, is like, if it's almost too simple, I think people just get bored really easy. And I'm one of those people. And that's why I was so addicted to weightlifting for so long, because it, you know, just when you think you have it figured out, like you have nothing figured out, you know? And so I just started to like, I literally went into my shop and built it. Like I didn't even draw it first. Like coming from a welding background, I was just like, dude, I'm gonna build something. And I built it with an offset weight similar to like what a kettlebell was. And then I put a handle, a straight handle, and I put a sleeve on top. And I actually started like training with it and adding weight to it and stuff like this. And at that point I was like, man, like I wasn't even looking for like a product to sell or anything. Like I was just looking for something cool to train, because we were all locked in our houses during COVID. And like I was bored. I wanted something different. The kettlebell was frustrating me. So I just went and built something. And that was the first prototype of the Freebell.
I think there's so much to that story of the product. And I tell people, one of the problems I think we have now in modern society is that we don't ever allow ourselves to get bored. We're attached to our phones, we're attached to our computers. And it's such a shame, because the garden, the soil of innovation and creativity oftentimes is boredom. That's part of it. It's like I've allowed my brain the time and the space to create for no other reason. And then the other part of what you dealt with is a problem, right? Like you had a problem, and innovation, all the innovation has been, you know, there's this thing that I want to, I want to create something that fixes this problem for me. And so COVID created this perfect opportunity for you to do that, which I think is just so freaking cool. I didn't know that part of the story, but I just think it's awesome. So
yeah, I wouldn't have. I probably, who knows what would have happened if I wasn't in lockdown, because I would have been back working 8 to 10 hours a day at the CrossFit and coaching privates and training, and you just kind of do your thing. And I don't think it's that, like, from what I've heard, it's really not that unique. I feel like tens to hundreds of stories like very similar during that lockdown, how people were like, all of a sudden,
yeah,
like something clicked, and they either made a choice to leave a corporate job or start an own business or something like that. So yeah, it was a blessing in disguise for us.
Yeah, I said right when the shutdowns happened, I said something beautiful is going to come out of this. This is like kind of horrific, and at first it was kind of scary because we thought like everybody was going to die or so. It was like kind of like this scary thing, and of course that didn't happen. But I did know that something beautiful was going to come out of it, and your Freebell is just one of many, many stories. But so what I'd love to dive into though is, okay, you had this creative process that led you to develop that first prototype, but then it obviously didn't stop there. So once you developed that prototype, like talk me through how the story goes from the prototype to like where you're at now.
Yeah, so after creating that prototype, I honestly my first thought was like this has to be somewhere. So I just kind of figured that somebody probably already made something similar to this. So I started to search and really couldn't find anything, and kind of trained with it for a while. And I had a really close friend. I had a really close friend that was a client and really successful in the business world. And I just kind of started talking to him about it, just like, hey, like I kind of like thought of this thing, and I don't know if there's any validity to it. Like I don't know if it's something that's already out there. Like what would you think? And he's always been a guy that has like I just put a lot of trust in. Like
Yeah.
he has. I have a few men in my life, my original strength coach and a couple other men that like I just put like a lot of trust in, and I'll just kind of like they've always been somebody that like you want to make proud, and you kind of follow their lead in a way. I think all men need those type of people in their lives. And so he put me in touch with a patent lawyer, and he's like, this is the easiest way, dude. Like, have one of these patent lawyers that does this for a business, have them do a search and just and do like a really deep dive into it. And they'll do an international search, and they'll search everything, they'll search every patent and just see. And so that's what I did. And I went on the patent search, and didn't come up with anything close. I mean, there was like a few like an little offset dumbbell, and people had made spinning handles with dumbbells, which I still don't quite understand. But they so I was like, holy cow, like maybe this can be something. And so I started, there was a local mechanical engineer with a machine shop. And I knew that like a crude prototype, like I had to figure out like if I could make something that could actually work outside of just like my gym. So I started to work with a mechanical engineer. At the same time, I started to do patent work, and kind of that the patent world was a kind of a trip for me, like learning about utility and design and everything, and what to differentiate those, and what protects you against certain things. And so I wound up getting 2 different patents on it, kind of like the design of it and the entire piece. And then I got a utility patent, which is a really good patent, which protects like the more like the mechanical part of it, the way the connections are made and things like that. And that's why people really didn't hear about it, because that patent process took a couple years.
Really?
And yeah, and it's fairly expensive, and there's multiple times in the back of your head when you're doing stuff like this, you're like, man, I hope this pays off.
Am I crazy? Yeah.
Am I crazy? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I went through multiple. I had four different prototypes that I went through total, and went through some huge learning curves, because one of them was like before I had patented the connection, learning about like how things are connected and the amount of machining and like things like that, and how that increases cost like tenfold, was a big learning curve, because you get these certain prototypes, you start to send them out to different manufacturers and stuff, and that's a whole like the manufacturing in the United States and how I had to actually go overseas is a whole another deal. But I had to learn that the way I designed it and the way I was working with engineers also had to carry over to how you produce and how you manufacture these things, and how you get it to be cost effective so that your consumers could actually afford it, and then you could be like somewhat competitive on the market with other things that might be similar, like our dumbbells and our kettlebells. And even though it's a little more intricate than that, those are still implements that you have to compete with,
Right.
Or at least be like somewhere in that world. So I was a couple things I wanted to do. I wanted to bootstrap it. I didn't want to borrow anything. I wanted it to be 100% mine, which still to this point it is, and I didn't have to borrow a cent from anybody. Um, I did have to go overseas. That was one of the most frustrating parts of this whole process, like by far. I wanted to produce this in America so bad, and I spent 2.5 years trying to get somebody. And most of the foundries and manufacturers would literally laugh me off the phone call.
Really?
What
Why?
I, what I, what I found was that, for one, foundries had dropped considerably during COVID. It was like, I read an article, it was like somewhere around 33,000 to 3,000. Um,
Wow.
U.S. manufacturing, just everyone started to go overseas, and all U.S. manufacturers wanted was oil and gas contracts and federal contracts. And anybody who's dealt with the federal government or oil and gas know that they write unlimited checks.
Right.
So those guys they could charge whatever they wanted, and they didn't want to mess with a startup. So that was one of the, I would say, the most frustrating parts of the whole deal was the fact that I like really put in a lot of effort to try to work with. I even wanted to work with somebody like in the region. You know, I wanted to be in like South Dakota, North Dakota, Idaho, Wyoming. I love the Mountain West. I love the people out here. I love the communities out here. And even the few price quotes I got were like so astronomically high that like it just, none of it made sense.
Right.
And that was the point. There was a point in there where I was like, dude, I don't know if I'm even going to do this. Like if this is the price point or whatever, like, I don't know. And then came Peter from Fringe Sport. And I owe that guy so much.
I didn't know he was involved, but I know Peter pretty well, and I didn't know.
Yeah, so I lived in, as you know, I lived in Austin, Texas
Yeah.
for a while, and I worked really closely with Atomic Athlete. Those guys
Got
were
my
like
shirt on right now, actually.
Yeah, that's, Jake and Todd and Raul
Yeah.
and Eli, those guys were there. They were always so great to me, and part of it was cool is they had ties to Jackson Hole also. So Jake and Todd and those guys, they trained out here with Rob Shaw back in the day, and so we kind of have that tie because I was living in Jackson before I went to Texas, before I came back to Jackson.
Right.
There was a kind of stop in between, and so I talked to Jake, and I was like, I wanted to talk to Jake before I talked to Peter, and I knew Peter and I coached Peter, and the main thing I did with Atomic Athlete is I coached the coaches. Like I would go there and I would teach them weightlifting, I think once or twice a week, and we would do a weightlifting session, and then that would help them teach their clients better. Those guys are huge believers in continuing education. Like they, and I had a lot of fun training those guys. And so I talked to Jake and I was like, dude, here's my idea. What do you think about me contacting Peter? And he was like, dude, Peter's a really busy guy, but like, I'll make the connection. I'll talk to Peter. I'll talk to him at the gym. Let him know you'll be contacting him. And made the connection, and I started talking to Peter about it. And in the beginning, it was like maybe a deal where Peter would produce it and do everything, and it kind of like a licensing type deal. And so we'd work. He had set me up with his manufacturer, which is a great connection because they've been just like fantastic. And started to work with them. Started to go through the process of building a prototype within their manufacturing that would work with, because our biggest hurdle was the outside needed to be ductile cast iron, and then the innards would be all machined steel. And that was going from a machined steel to everything, which is just like that. You'll never get away with that.
Right.
You know, it was $800 a weight type deal. So I started working with them and everything, and then it came up that Peter had a huge deal. I think a friend of his was having a hard time fulfilling a huge order. And Peter was just like, man, I got to put it on hold real quick. I have to fulfill this order. But continue, you can work with my manufacturer. If you want to work with me later on in quarter 3 or 4, we'll talk, we'll figure that out again. If you just want to work with the manufacturer, I will help you any way possible. So like I said, Peter was,
That's awesome.
I don't know what I would be doing without Peter. Like,
Yeah.
He really put himself out there. He didn't have to connect me to his manufacturer. He could have stopped right there, honestly. He's like, hey, this is my manufacturer. He could have been like, I'll talk to you in quarter 4. But we had multiple conversations on the phone, and his whole deal was he like genuinely just wanted to do what's best for me, and he said he would help me with business side, whatever, and then that kind of led me to just working one-on-one with that manufacturer, and got me to the point I am now with having full sets, 2 kilos all the way to 24. We got in like a pretty good deal with the manufacturer, and we're kind of like moving forward now to, we have our two sample sets. We have our full sets, so 2, 4, 6, 8, 12, 16, 24 kilo, and we're going to be debuting here in like 3 days at the Summit Games, formerly the Iron Games in Salt Lake City, and we'll be there set up, showing CrossFit athletes, showing strength athletes. There's going to be a strongman competition, and that'll be kind of debuting it.